Welcome to another episode of the Engage podcast. On today's podcast, we'll review some of the latest MEC news headlines and then jump into a discussion with your new MEC Master Chairman, Captain Eric Criswell. I'm your host, Laura Woods. The weather has been wild and so have the reroutes. If you are a little hazy about what all those reroute rules are, please jump back to episode 35. It talks about new contract implementation for the reroute. There's also a few scheduling alerts out there, and definitely don't forget the scheduling reference handbook that we've all read cover to cover. Pilots heading to training this year. If you have any questions or you're having some communication issues with your sim planner or OE planner, please send a dart over to training and we will make your problem ALPA's problem. Now that you're filled in on what's going on in the MEC, I'd like to introduce our guest, Captain Eric Criswell. He started as our MEC chair January 1st of this year for a 2-year term. He's been an LEC rep in Minneapolis, a negotiator, and most recently a chair of the negotiating committee that brought all of us Contract 2019. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, Laura, thanks.
You spent a lot of time as a negotiator. That was a really big pull, and so is MEC chair. What made you want to pursue being an MEC chair?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I think back to, I first started union service in 2016. We had just gone through the TA1 failure and all the changes that brought about in the union. I was one of the guys with pitchforks out there in social media upset about, the way that all went down, and just felt compelled to help at that point. And I guess still now, still fairly early in my career, and I really felt strongly I wanted to try to make an impact and then enjoy the fruits of the labor, honestly. I just really felt compelled to jump in and try to create a positive influence. So spent a little time as a rep in Minneapolis and went through the whole TA2 negotiation and spent a little time in council work at that point. An opening was coming up on the previous negotiating committee, and that's obviously something that I felt like was very impactful and just honestly one of the biggest honors I can imagine as a union volunteer is to be involved in that process. Now, I didn't really know what I was signing up for at that time, but it really was, honestly, can say this with 100% certainty, one of the most incredible experiences of my life to be involved in that effort, really from start to finish on that contract. With that said, at the end of that contract negotiation in the end of 2022, going into 2023, definitely was ready to spend more time at home, spend more time in the cockpit, and cycle out, and really had no intention at that point in time to seek further ALPA work, because it felt like, mission accomplished and felt like I left a mark, and I can come and enjoy the contract that I ended up knowing pretty well. So I think we have an opportunity to back it up, and I feel like there's still more to the job. We went through one incredible roller coaster ride with that last contract negotiation, and we're going to go into another one here. And the team that was willing to step back in, I just think so highly of, and feel like we can really leave a positive impact in our 2 years in office here.
Well, thank you for being willing to step up into a role that carries such a responsibility. It sounds like this is not something you came to lightly. Can you tell me a little bit about the team that you've been able to build around you?
Really have an awesome team that we started to form, and primarily very excited to do this job with the team that I'm here with. Of course, we have Brandon Conwell, the vice chair of the MEC. He was on the negotiating committee with me as well for Contract 2019. And Shane Corbett was our previous secretary, just an outstanding individual, does a great job in that role. So he's continuing on with that. We've got Nick Reed, former training chairman, is now the treasurer of the MEC. Really just a solid group of guys here in the office that are going to see this job through for the next 2 years.
That's great. I know everyone that I've personally spoken to speaks very highly of your admin team, so I'm excited to see what the next 2 years will bring. Speaking of the next 2 years, what is the main goal? What's your focus going to be?
Really, the goal that I think unites us all is, we saw what happened with this last contract. It was a slog. It was 6 years. And none of us, from when we really started work on that contract to when it was ratified, none of us expected that. But it was, it was a pretty comprehensive deal. We made that deal without going down some of the traditional lines of negotiation that we've done here in the past, which is, hey, maybe we need to give up something to get something. And that was really personally a motivator to me, is to figure out a way to not do that time. And I feel like, there's an opportunity here. Delta's successful. Our pilots are contributing to this operation in a really, really high level. and we should do it again. I feel like we can back this thing up and do it again, and with the right mindset and leadership, I feel like this next contract can really back up what we did the last time.
It might be a little early in the process, but what do you see the next contract focusing on?
We definitely have some things I think we're going to want to address in this next round of contracts. The pilots are going to drive this, though, and that's really what motivates us, is to dig in and figure out where our pilot group is and represent them as best we can and bring their perspective to the table.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're going to take a lot of your experience from negotiations and bring it into the MEC chair position.
We'll try, yeah. I mean, I'm not on the negotiating committee anymore. We do have a cursory role via policy that the MEC chairman gets to designate somebody that rides along with the negotiations, but we're going to elect that committee at the next MEC meeting in March. So anyone out there listening that has an interest in this sort of thing, talk to your reps and see if it's something that works for you. Anyone that wants to run for negotiating committee can do so at the March MEC meeting. It'll be here in Atlanta. And once that committee's in place, there's a fair amount of prep work that they'll do just to get their feet under them and get familiar with the process. I'm available to them completely, and so is Brandon. One of my executive administrators is Rich Wheeler. He's the current negotiating committee chairman. So once that committee's in place, he'll take a full-time role in our admin, and he'll also be, completely available to them.
Wow. So it sounds like you have a lot of experienced and talented pilots around you, and this is not their first rodeo.
We really do have a team here that's geared and has a mindset for what we're going to face in the next 2 years, which is the preparations for negotiations, fully understanding where the pilot group is, getting out there and interacting with pilots in various ways to make sure that we know that the temperature of the pilot group, and then getting in there and engaging and opening the contract. Negotiations will start in April of 2026. That's a date that's outlined in our contract. So that's not a discretionary date. That's a date that we can count on, that we will be opening contract negotiations. So a lot to do between now and then, and just excited to roll up sleeves and get going on it.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like some really great goals for the upcoming year and into 2026. I'm going to switch over a little bit. So we're in grievance mediation, and that's a little bit new to Delta. Can you talk to some of our listeners who are unfamiliar with what this is and what it used to be and how this affects the Delta pilots, if this works better for the Delta pilots? Just kind of give us a history on this.
So it's pretty new. This is a concept that's been utilized at quite a few other airlines. At Delta, to my knowledge, we have not used this technique until recently. Traditionally, when there's a dispute, so let's just say it's about the crew meals that we just negotiated in the last contract, and we don't like the way that they've been implemented for various reasons, we can file a grievance. And our contract admin team puts together a whole package and researches and gets all the language and all the notes, and then submits it to the company for grievance. Goes through a process of pre-grievance hearings, and then eventually we'll go through a system board hearing. Now that initial system board has 2 members from the company and 2 members from the association, and the case gets outlined in that hearing, and then a decision gets made by those 4 panel members to decide, hey, is there a valid grievance here and what needs to be done about it? Very often, those 2 company members see it the company's way, and the 2 ELPA members see it the pilot's way. So it deadlocks. And the next opportunity for us to have that heard is via a second system board hearing, commonly referred to as the 5-member board. We add a neutral arbitrator to that mix. So a similar hearing will happen where we lay the case out. We have 2 pilot members from the ELPA and 2 pilot members from management, as well as a neutral arbitrator. And then that's really where the decision for a grievance eventually ends up being made, is by that arbitrator. So that process is very lengthy, and there's times where that can be expedited based on certain circumstances, but generally we're talking not weeks or months, but almost certainly years in some cases where we don't really get a resolution for that. And then it's kind of a wild card for both us and the company for where that arbitrator will come down on their decision. So what mediation does is it basically takes the place of that 4-member system board hearing, and it gets both parties in the room. It gets effectively the company's negotiating team and ELPA's negotiating team, and gets them in the room and lets them just talk freely about the issue in a supervised way. So the National Mediation Board provides a mediator that'll come and meet on site with those 2 teams and facilitate. There's a standard format that they allow for the mediation to happen, but the goal there is just to talk it out in plain language and figure out, hey, is there a path forward here?
If you can say, are we seeing much success with grievance mediation so far?
So it's pretty new. I think we've only had 2 sessions up to this point. I actually participated in both of them just as a former negotiator, because a lot of the issues that are ripe right now are as a result of implementation. We had some success at the first one. There's a few issues that were resolved that way or are in the process of being resolved. The second one, I would say, is still ongoing, that there wasn't a solid resolution to several issues from the second one. So I would say the jury's out. I think there's some optimism on both sides that when you get decision makers in a room and you talk freely about what each side is motivated to accomplish, there can be a path forward. At the end of the day, it's really just comes down to who shows up on both sides, and if you have a decision maker at the table from the company who can see through the issue and come to a conclusion that works for ELPA. So if they can't, which I think will be the case with some of these items, we'll end up back in the traditional path, and we'll immediately work to schedule that 5-member board with the arbitrator, and we'll have our case be heard in that format for final resolution.
Sounds good. So it sounds like some of the easier items you can get through faster, and then the big items that the company and ALPA don't agree on may have to take that longer process, but at least some of these items can get, the turkey sandwich problem can get fixed a little bit faster possibly than maybe some of the others.
You'd be surprised, Laura. So what some people might think would be an easy issue turns out has tentacles everywhere, and some of them we agree with, some of them we don't. Some more what you would consider a heavier issue, we chop through pretty quickly. So there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason from our side. The company has their motivations. They have a lot of different employee groups and audiences across the street that are watching what happens in some of these cases. So, the answer is not always as clear-cut as most pilots and myself think it should be. Love it or hate it, that's the reality. And the mediation really gives us an opportunity to, one last time, hey, this is what we mean. Why is this a problem? And try to get reasonable heads to prevail. And if we can't, we still have the process. We don't give anything up by participating in the mediation.
So you talked a little bit about how 2025 is going to look, right? You're getting your team together. Everyone's getting in place. There'll be negotiators that will be elected. Do you have anything else in 2025 that's going to be a hot topic?
Yeah, so we've gotten used to 100 plus new hires a month and staffing improvements and lots of movement, growth. We've seen recently Delta has signaled that they potentially could slow hiring down in the last part of the year. I think it's all just hearsay at this point. Nobody really knows. I know some people have put it in writing in various places, but the reality is we got a fair amount of growth still planned this year. Mainline growth, wide body deliveries, narrow body deliveries. On top of that, there's still some things kicking in from the contract. We still have our vacation value April 1st for the vacation year that we're currently bidding. That goes to 4 hours and 35 minutes a day. That alone is a pretty significant staffing increase just to fund that vacation. And we also have our staffing formula. We have a final improvement to that happening this summer, which also is going to add some staffing. So, I think that could potentially be a hot issue, is if they truly do think that they can slow down on hiring and start to run it a little hot, like maybe we saw back in 2018 and 2019, that could kind of come to the forefront as an issue. And just the background on that, in 2018, I believe Flat Ops communicated that they had found some efficiencies in the way that they could build rotations and thought that was going to quantify itself by needing several hundred pilots less. They stopped hiring for a period of time. So what happened is they stopped hiring and realized, we actually need pilots today, or we need them yesterday. So they started hiring again in earnest. And by the time 2019, the summer came around, we were way behind the power curve. And that was the summer that they ended up writing a memo to the pilots apologizing for running things so hot. So I hope, and I will convey our desire to avoid that sort of scenario to happen to us again. And we'll use our opportunity to influence across the street, because that really is not a healthy thing for the airline or the pilot group. It causes a lot of disruption, causes a lot of inflexibility in pilots' quality of life and scheduling. It's not a great thing when they are way behind the power curve on staffing. Not to mention, we have contractual requirements. We have a staffing formula that requires a certain number of pilots, and I believe at that time there were several violations in that staffing formula as well, which, obviously if that happens again, we will aggressively pursue a grievance.
Yeah, if any of our listeners were here in 2019, that summer was wild. and it almost seemed like it came out of nowhere. So staffing might be a hot topic in 2025, and then obviously we'll be rolling into openers in 2026. I assume there's quite a bit of work to do getting that all ready.
The first real part of that is getting this negotiating committee in place. Likelihood is these are not going to be entry-level type individuals that end up on that committee. They're going to have some experience potentially doing local council work, being reps in their bases, potentially working on other committees. We've got an awesome bench of ELPA volunteers here that have varied backgrounds, and I mean, I'm just blown away by some of the skill sets of the people in this building. I think a lot of our pilots that haven't witnessed this would be shocked to know the level of aptitude we have doing some of this work. So those are the sorts of people that gravitate toward these positions and make their skill sets known. But toward the end of the summer, you'll start to see some educational type things. Hey, this is what's in our contract. This is what's in our peers' contracts. We have a great contract, but our peers have some things that beat us. I mean, absolutely. So the best thing that just any individual that is looking to participate in this process can do is get educated. We're going to put out a contract comparison document, a contract history document, and those are going to be great sources. And then probably a whole slew of different educational type comms talking about what our benefits are in relation to what we've had in the past and what our peers have. So just read up on everything. All of it's going to be very informative, and that's the best way you can participate during that process is just getting informed. And then we're going to send out a full comprehensive contract survey so that you can very specifically tell us what your expectations are for this next contract.
So this summer, be on the lookout for contract comparison, contract history, and then, of course, surveys, so you make sure your voice is heard by the negotiating team.
One thing we have right now that I'm pretty excited about, we've been talking about this week already, is, in the past, these comprehensive surveys, there's some multiple choice type questions, but there's also some free form where you can write in your response. And there's been ways that we've processed that in the past, and literally in some cases try to read every one of those and aggregate it. But there's this new tool with AI that we're very excited about, that we believe we can employ to get in there and give us real good, hard analysis on some of these free-form answers. And it's a tool that hasn't existed before. So I'm very excited about that piece. We're going to figure out if there's a method to be able to scrape that data and get something very usable out of those free-form answers. So my hope is to be able to communicate some more about that, but it's really to encourage, hey, write us, give us all your thoughts and feelings about why you want, what your priorities are. And the multiple choice is helpful to us for sure, but being able to put your own voice to it, I think, is going to be a kind of a next level thing for us to really dig in and figure out where the pilot group's at.
Awesome. So it sounds like in 2025, we're really looking for involvement from pilots, which doesn't mean showing up physically somewhere, right? An LEC event, or even though we love to have everyone show up at the training pubs every first Tuesday of the month at Brass Tap on Virginia Avenue, but more so just staying informed, up to date, understand what other carriers have, and then formulate your own opinion and use that in the survey and communicate that. Yeah,
those physical events are great too. I mean, anytime that we can be there and involved, we will be. Like you said, we do the Brass Tap event, the training pub on Virginia Avenue. That's extremely popular. We just had one this week and well attended, and I encourage anyone who's in town for training to come to that. You'll almost certainly see somebody from the admin, negotiating committee, maybe scheduling committee, R&I committee. Very, very common that they make their way over there and just spend time in the room with whoever shows up. So those are awesome events. Local council meetings, obviously, that's kind of the standard way to be involved, and those will continue. So absolutely, if you can carve out a little bit of time to attend your local council meetings, that's where you get your most local information too. You've got reps that are tuned into your base. There may be local issues happening there that really aren't applicable elsewhere. That's where you get that information. That's going to be a priority for our team, is the outreach, the ability to make sure that when we go jump into this next round of negotiations and really just along the way to make sure we know where you're at and how we can best represent the pilot group.
Exactly. Stay informed, stay engaged, stay up to date on what's happening both in your local council and the pilot group at large. Looks like we're just about time to wrap up. Do you have any parting thoughts for the Delta pilots?
We want to hear from you. We've got a whole slew of new tools available to pilots to send their feedback. Whether you think you have a contract issue, you can send in a DART to our contract admin committee. You got scheduling issues. There's an ongoing effort to streamline that process between the company's pay assist form, and there's some really new automation technology that allows us to interface with those forms and get your case imported into the ALPA system so we can see what interactions you've had with Delta, and then take it from there. If Delta thinks that you don't have a claim to something and you still think you do, then I highly encourage you to utilize our new STS system. That is actively evolving. There's ongoing improvements to that really on a monthly basis that are building it into something that's going to be extremely powerful for our pilots to be able to make sure that the contract's being followed and that they're being paid properly. There's, of course, the pay modernization effort. We've heard a little bit about that from leadership in flat ops. That's a high priority, because if you can't confidently look at a paycheck and say, yeah, I got paid for what I was owed, that's a huge fail. And we spend a lot of time negotiating this contract and all of its various provisions and benefits just to have it not show up on your paycheck properly. So it's something I know that flat ops leadership is tuned into. They're saying all the right things. They're putting resources in the right places. We really want to see that move forward, and we want to see the follow through on that. So I just encourage you not to be your own border cop on the contract. That's what we're here for, but we need to know about it. So be your own advocate and involve us early, involve us often. That's what we're here for. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure you're getting the benefit of all the hard work that's been done in the past to make this the career that it is, and make these benefits the way they are.
Awesome. Sounds great. Just want to thank you for sitting down with us today, and thank you for raising your hand and stepping up to MEC chair, helping the Delta pilots as we move forward in 2025.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I look forward to doing another one of these. We'll do updates periodically, and that's a commitment I'd like to make sure that you're hearing it directly from us and that we can be responsive to where pilots are.
Thanks for listening. This is Engage, a podcast for Delta pilots. I'm Laura Woods. Stay safe.